Okay, here's our agenda for the next 90 minutes or so. First, we will review some search tips from the National Library of Medicine for using PubMed effectively. We're going to examine PubMed search details, and then a little later, we'll explore phrase searching. During our deep dive into automatic term mapping, or ATM, we are going to talk about the order of ATM operations and how it can affect your search results, the 3 ATM translation tables, and how to bypass ATM when it's not doing what you want it to do. So by the end of this class, you are going to have a great understanding of what is happening behind the scenes when you run a search in PubMed. I do have a couple of PowerPoint slides, but the bulk of this class is going to be done through live demonstration and hands-on exercises in PubMed. You can choose to just sit back and watch, or you can follow along by opening a new tab on your computer, using a second monitor, or using your phone to search PubMed. Okay, with that, I am going to turn off my camera and we are going to move into our class content. So before we get to those National Library of Medicine search tips, let's broadly define automatic term mapping, or ATM. ATM is PubMed's behind-the-scenes process that kicks in automatically when you enter terms into the search box without any sort of qualifiers like quotation marks or tags. ATM is designed to help you make the most of the programming behind the PubMed search box so that you retrieve relevant results, and you don't have to do anything special to turn it on. To take advantage of ATM, the National Library of Medicine recommends following these 7 search tips. When you enter terms into the search box, be as specific as possible. The more terms you use, the narrower your search will be and the fewer results you retrieve. So focusing on significant keywords is a really good first approach. You do not need to use any punctuation, such as quotation marks, at least for your first pass at the search. And this is especially true when you search using an entry term or a mesh term, and we're going to talk about why that is a little later today. You do not need to use the AND Boolean operator to combine concepts because PubMed will do this automatically. You don't need to capitalize, and PubMed can recognize and find phrases for you. And today we'll show you how to determine if your phrase is indexed in PubMed. In most cases, you should start your search without using tags, such as the mesh tag or the title and abstract tag, because tags turn off PubMed's automatic processing. And lastly, PubMed is smart, so let it do the work for you. It can distinguish between subject words, journal titles, and author names based on years' worth of data, and we're going to go into a lot of detail today about how PubMed does this. So with those tips in mind, we are going to walk through a basic search to get acquainted with ATM. This slide shows a screenshot of PubMed's search box, and it lets you do what some might call a keyword search, but in a really sophisticated way because of how PubMed is programmed. So here we see a search for indigestion abdominal pain has been typed into the search box. Notice there are no quotes or tags, and there's no AND operator in between terms. So to see how PubMed interpreted this search, we would click on the link that says Advanced right underneath the search box. And then we would scroll down the page to the History and Search Details section and click on that right-facing arrow or chevron in the Details column to expand and show our search details. So now we're looking at the expanded view of those search details. And you can see right off the bat, PubMed did much more than just look for the 3 words that were entered into the search box. And you can review the search details in either this top section or the bottom section. They both provide the same information. It's just presented in a slightly different way. This bottom translation section shows how PubMed interpreted each of your different search terms. So if you've entered multiple words into the search box, it can be easier to review your details down here. And that's what we're going to do. So we see that the term indigestion mapped to the mesh term dyspepsia. So mapping to mesh, will retrieve all the Medline citations indexed with this mesh term. PubMed also searched for the mesh term dyspepsia in all fields, which will retrieve the non-Medline citations that don't have mesh indexing. And PubMed didn't ignore the specific term that was entered into the search box. We see indigestion was also searched for in all fields. And then these three parts were ORed together to expand the search. Next, we see abdominal pain mapped to the mesh term abdominal pain. Then abdominal pain was broken into pieces, abdominal and pain, and each piece was searched for in all fields and ANDed together. Lastly, PubMed recognized the phrase abdominal pain and searched for it in all fields. And then these three parts were ORed together to expand the search. So we get all this from 3 words, and that's ATM in action. Now we are going to start digging into what exactly is going on behind the scenes when ATM kicks in. When you search for a term without quotes or tags, PubMed tries to match your term against 3 translation tables that have been developed from the data in PubMed. And you can envision these tables as being like an index in the back of a book, made up of the words, journal details, and author names that appear in PubMed. The 3 tables are subjects, journals, and authors, and that's the order that automatic term mapping goes in. And that's also the answer to number 1 on your handout: subjects, journals, and authors. So notice the conveyor belt that we have at the bottom of this slide. You can think of that conveyor belt as representing the ATM process. Imagine the terms you've entered in the search box as being on a conveyor belt that stops at each translation table. First, ATM tries to map your term to the subject translation table and connect them with 1 or more mesh terms. If a term maps to mesh, it gets off the conveyor belt and ATM processing on that term is complete. PubMed won't look for it in the other translation tables. For example, in the search details we looked at just a few slides ago, the subjects indigestion and abdominal pain map to mesh terms, so they both got off the ATM conveyor belt at that first stop. All the terms that don't map to the subject translation table continue on the conveyor belt to the second stop, which is the journals translation table. The journals translation table is a list of all the journal titles in PubMed, so not just the Medline journals. If a match is found for a journal title, it gets off the conveyor belt and processing on that term is complete. Whatever terms are left on the conveyor belt continue to the third stop, which is the author translation table. And if a match is found there, processing on that term is complete. Finally, each term is also searched in all fields. So you may remember a few slides ago, we saw the term indigestion was also searched in all fields, even though it had mapped to a mesh term. And PubMed does this additional processing to ensure it doesn't miss any relevant results for you. All right, before we take a closer look at each stop on the conveyor belt, I just want to pause for a minute and see if there are any questions on what we've covered so far.
Nothing yet, but maybe people are furiously typing, so we'll give them just a moment. But Erica will be stopping throughout, so if you think of something, jot it down, get it ready. So nothing's come in yet, so.
All right, we will move on. All right, we're going to look at the first stop, the subject translation table. And we mentioned that this is where terms get mapped to mesh, but this table actually contains more than just mesh terms.
Erica,
it contains...
Sorry to interrupt. We're just seeing, oh, I'm sorry. I'm seeing different things on my different screen, so I think everybody's seeing the correct thing. Let me know if you're not. It's a little odd. I don't know why.
All right, yeah, we should be seeing a slide that says first stop, subject translation table.
Yeah.
Okay, getting some thumbs up. Great, thank you. All right, so we mentioned this is where terms get mapped to mesh, But this table actually contains more than mesh terms. It contains everything that's on the left side of the slide. PubMed is going to look in those 9 places to try to find a match for your terms during this first stop. And this is the answer to number 2 on your handout, and I'm going to display this slide for a bit while I'm talking so you can copy these down if you want to. In the subject translation table, we have mesh terms, entry terms, which are synonyms for mesh terms, mesh subheadings, supplementary concepts or substance names and their synonyms, publication types, singular and plural word forms, British and American spellings, drug brand to generic name translation, and terms derived from UMLS, which is the Unified Medical Language System. UMLS is comprised of nearly 200 biomedical vocabularies from varying disciplines. So, for example, the health insurance industry has its own vocabulary, and the laboratory industry, where we get our blood drawn, has its own vocabulary. And UMLS brings together and integrates these different vocabularies and links similar names for the same concept. And it's important to know that these vocabularies are working behind the scenes in PubMed because sometimes your search terms will map to mesh, but it may not be obvious why they mapped. So we're going to do an exercise in PubMed now that is going to illustrate this. And if you'd like to search along, you can open up PubMed by going to www.pubmed.gov. I'm going to bring that up now, and we all should be seeing a PubMed home screen.
Yep.
Great, thank you. We are actually going to do this first exercise in the MESH database. And to get to MESH from the PubMed home screen, just scroll down a little bit, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the Explore column, and we have a link there for the MESH database. So just click on that. And once you're in MESH, go up to the search box and enter shin bone. That's 2 words into the search box. And it's search example A on your handout. And once you have that in there, click search. And then scroll down a little bit until you see the entry terms. And let me know in the chat if shin bone is listed as an entry term. All right, I'm seeing a few people responding to that. That's right. Shin bone is not listed as an entry term, which is odd because our term mapped to the mesh term tibia, so we would expect to see shin bone listed as a synonym or an entry term, but the only one that we have here is tibias plural. So this is an example of mapping pulled in from UMLS vocabulary. PubMed found our term shin bone in UMLS, and the UMLS term mapped to mesh. Now, the bottom line is if your term maps to mesh correctly, you don't really need to know how the mapping occurred, but just understand that there are many tables underlying the subject mapping behind the scenes in PubMed. And if we piqued your curiosity and you're interested in learning more about the source vocabularies that are represented in UMLS, we have included some information on your handout under additional resources. We are going to do a couple exercises now working with the subject translation table. So let's click the back arrow 2 times just to get back to our PubMed search screen. And let's search for the term backache. That's all one word. And don't use any quotes or tags. And once you have your results showing, let's bring up the search details. So if you remember how we do that, we go up to our search box and click on the link that says advanced under the search box, and then scroll down to the history and search details section and click on the right facing chevron or arrow. All right, the first thing we notice in this top section of our search details is that backache mapped to the mesh term back pain. So mapping to mesh means our search will bring in Medline citations. Next, this mesh term was broken into pieces, back and pain, and each piece was searched for in all fields and ANDed together. Then the mesh term back pain was searched for in all fields. And the term that we entered into the search box, backache, was searched for in all fields. And lastly, we see an example of our enhanced ATM, which includes plurals, and backaches plurals was searched for in all fields. So I have a bonus question for you. Does anyone know what does not appear in our search details here, but is included in our search? You can let me know in the chat if you have an idea. What does not appear in the search details that's right here, but is included in our search?
Erica, I'm going to interject here because I know some of the folks on today's call participated in the intro and the mesh session, and we covered this
Oh,
in
good.
those two
Okay.
classes. And you did an exercise, some of you, and you answered correctly. So
Okay, think back a few days ago, thinking back to last week. All right, I'm going to jog everybody's memory. What does not appear are the narrower mesh terms or explosions. So because we mapped to a mesh term, behind the scenes, PubMed searched for citations indexed with all of the narrower or exploded terms that fall below this mesh term in the hierarchy. And these concepts are not shown here in the search details. So let's go back into mesh and we are going to look up the term backache to see if there are any narrower terms. So to get to mesh from this page, just go down towards the bottom of the screen and you'll find a link there for mesh. Open that up and then enter backache into the search box and hit search. All right. Now we know from the search that we just did that back pain is the mesh term for backache. So we're going to click on that. And then scroll down to the hierarchy section of the record, which is underneath the entry terms. And we see under back pain, there are two narrower mesh terms, failed back surgery syndrome and low back pain. So these two narrower mesh terms were included in the search we just did, even though they did not display in the search details. Citations in PubMed are indexed with the most specific mesh term available to describe their content, so we could expect that some of the citations in our set of results would include articles that have been indexed with one of these narrower terms. And this is called automatic explosion, and it's done by design. These narrower terms are automatically included so that you don't miss any possible relevant results. Okay, let's go on the back arrow, click that 3 times to get back to our PubMed search details, and we'll just do a quick recap here before we go. We searched for the single term backache. When it got to the subject translation table in the ATM process, it mapped to the mesh term back pain. We know now that once a term maps to a translation table, it's the processing on that term stops and the PubMed won't look for it in the other translation tables. Now, if our term had not mapped to the subject translation table, it would have continued on to the second stop on that conveyor belt. Does anyone remember what that is? Right. Yeah, journals. All right. We're going to go back into our slides now and take a look at that table. So PubMed and ATM are programmed to recognize journal titles in 3 different ways: the full journal title, the Medline title abbreviation, and the ISSN with dashes. And this is the answer to number 3 on your handout. If you just enter a piece of a journal title, PubMed will usually not find a match in the journal translation table. So for best results, enter a journal title in one of these 3 ways. We are going to go right back into PubMed now and do a little journal searching. Bring up the home screen. All right. So once you're here, go ahead and type in New England Journal of Medicine into the search box. And that can be all in small case. Okay. And some of you may know that the official title is the New England Journal of Medicine, but journal titles can be searched for with or without that initial article. So they're still going to map to the appropriate journal. Okay, we'll run this search now. And let's see, we get over 88,000 results at the top here. And glancing at those results, we see the journal name in the title of this first citation. And looking at the journal that these are in, all these articles are in, they are in the New England Journal of Medicine. This is the Medline abbreviation for the journal title, N space ENGL space J space Med. All right, let's click on our search details to find out what ATM did. All right, so under the translation section, we see that the full title mapped to the journal table here. This is what it looks like. We've got the Medline title abbreviation and then journal in brackets with the journal ID number. So this is going to bring in all the citations from the journal. What else is in the search details here? What else happened? Let me know in the chat. Well, we see that ATM kicked in and it broke our journal title apart into all separate pieces. And it searched for every piece in all fields. It even searched for of. So when terms are mapped to the subject translation table, stop words like of are ignored. However, as we see here, stop words are included for journal titles. We also see that the journal title was searched for in all fields. So if our goal is just to find citations from a specific journal, then we probably don't want all this extra stuff here. ATM is always going to try to do a broad enough search to pull in all relevant citations for you. But if you want a more precise search, you could just copy and paste this part for the journal, put it into your query box and run that search. And now you see we have slightly fewer results. We have over 86,000 instead of 88,000. All right, so the New England Journal of Medicine is a very well-known journal. So it would be understandable to think that you could just put a part of the title into the search box and get your desired results. So let's try that. Let's clear our search box and just enter the words New England Journal. No caps or quotes. Got that in there. We'll run our search. And let's glance at these citations. So this one is in New England Journal of Medicine. Our citation is from the World Neurosurgical Journal. We've got JAMA Network Open. We're seeing a lot more mentions of various words in the abstract and the title of the articles. So not really going in the direction that we want. Let's take a look at our search details to see what happened. I'm going to minimize this other search we did. All right, here's the one that we just ran. So in the translation section, we see New England and journal were searched separately. It wasn't kept together. New England mapped to the mesh term for the geographic region, and journal mapped to the mesh term periodicals as topic. And both of these terms map to mesh terms in the subject translation table. So they got off the conveyor belt and they never had the opportunity to proceed to the journal's translation table. So our search certainly went awry this time, and it drives home the point to follow one of the 3 recommended ways to find a journal title, because problems can arise when a journal title is also a mesh term. So on that note, can you think of some examples of journal titles that are also mesh terms? Let me know in the chat box if you can think of a few. Journal titles that would also be mesh terms. Blood, right? Yeah. What are a few others that you can think of? Just good. Yeah. Yeah, those are great. Great examples. All right. Well, let's see what ATM does when we search for the journal cell. So I'm going to just type into the query box here, cell, and run my search. All right. Taking a look at the results, we can quickly tell we're heading in the wrong direction here. These are not in the journal cell, and cell is just appearing all over the place in these citations. So take a look at the search details and let me know in the chat, what did ATM do and why? Right, you all are getting it. Cell mapped to the mesh term in the subject translation table, got off that conveyor belt and didn't proceed to the journal's translation table. So do any of you have an idea of how we could adjust our search and force PubMed to look for our term as a journal title? Right, yeah. We could, you're you're all getting it. We could use a search field tag to tell PubMed where we want it to look. And the search field tag for journals is the word journal in brackets. And if you don't remember what a specific field tag is, you can always go to this advanced search builder page, go to your fields drop-down menu, and then here we can scroll down, oops, scroll down and select journal. All right, so now that we have journal selected for our field, we can type cell in. And you'll notice when I start typing that autocomplete kicks in with journal titles that have the word cell in it. And this can be really helpful if you can't remember exactly what a journal title is, because some of them are a little complicated. In our case, cell is a really easy one to remember. So here it is. We'll add that to our query box. Now we're all ready to search for cell, the journal. We'll run our search. And you'll notice the journal's highlighted here. All these citations are coming from the journal cell. All right. So any questions about journal searching before we jump back into our slides?
Yeah, there were two, well, one about journals, and then I want to sort of go back a little bit. But someone made a comment that it was interesting that NEJM did translate correctly, and
Yeah,
um,
that I'm glad somebody saw that. Yeah, so um, PubMed does include some common aliases for journal titles in the mapping file, since many users will look for citations from the New England Journal of Medicine using NEJM as a search term. And if you were to pull up the National Library of Medicine catalog record for the New England Journal of Medicine, you would see those aliases listed in the other titles field. So good. I'm so happy that somebody searched that way because I always thought that was interesting. And it looks like Amanda Sawyer, who's from the PubMed product team, has put that link in there for you so you can check that out.
okay. And then the other question was from a previous section, but it's the question is, are narrower terms in the hierarchy included automatically when you use a field tag? So I guess if you searched for back pain, right, not starting in mesh, but right here, or I guess yeah, not starting in mesh. If you tagged it as a mesh term, will it include the narrower exploded terms? Because it's the person went on to say it's hard to tell because if we look at search details, well, we don't see exploded terms anyway. So
Mm-hmm.
are they included when you run a tagged search?
I have my um, idea, but Rebecca or Amanda, do you know the definitive for sure answer?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer. Yes, if you tag a mesh term with the mesh field tag, the search will still include the narrower terms below that mesh term. You can turn it off. It's in the user guide. There's syntax you can use to turn it off if you want to search for one specific mesh term and not the narrower terms underneath it.
Great, thank you. And then the other part of that was the questioner mentioned, if you used Booleans, and so Booleans are not going to turn explosion on or off, or I think affect things. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, but the answer is yes. So, and those were okay. Yeah. So Katie says, thank you. She's been wondering for so long. So
Oh, good.
now
Good
you can sleep
question.
at night, Katie.
Yeah. That's great.
That was all.
Okay. Keep those questions coming. We're going to move on to our last stop, which is the author translation table. So I have a question for all of you. How many of you have tried to find all of the citations by a particular author in PubMed before? Seeing lots of thumbs up. All right. Yeah, author name search is one of the 3 most frequent types of searches in PubMed. So those of you that have done that, how many of you have been frustrated by that process? Seeing a heart, I don't know if that means frustration or not, but yes, it can be a kind of messy search. We hope that understanding how PubMed and ATM recognize a name will help you run a more successful author search. All right, so for this section, we are going to be looking at questions 4, 5, and 6 on your handout. The author translation table or author name table includes author names and initials going back to 1946. And that's the answer to number 4 on your handout. So if you wrote an article that's indexed in PubMed, you are included in the author name table. And it doesn't have to be a Medline journal to be included. It's any of the records in PubMed. The National Library of Medicine suggests searching with last name, space, first initial to run the most comprehensive author search. And this is the answer to number 5 on your handout. You can also search for an author's full name in either the natural or inverted order, but this is going to run a less comprehensive search depending on when the work was authored. Who knows why searching with the full name may be less comprehensive? I'll give you a hint. The answer is on the slide. Why would searching by a full name be less comprehensive? Right? We have a couple of answers showing up there now. PubMed only began accepting full names from publishers in 2002. So that's the answer to number 6 on your handout. We are going to go back into PubMed now, and we're going to try a couple of different author searches to see the impact that each format has on our search results. All right, so bring up PubMed here, and let's start with a full name search. And you'll find the name on your handout. It is Search Example E, and the name is Juan Gomez Reyeno. So you can enter that in. You don't use any punctuation tags or quotes. As I mentioned a moment ago, you can enter full names in either the natural or inverted order. If you choose that inverted order, then it's optional to include a comma after the last name. You also may have noticed on your handout that this is a hyphenated last name, and including that hyphen is also optional. All right, so we'll run this search. And we have 234 results up here. We also get this information notice in this blue bar above our citations. So see how smart PubMed is? It knew we were searching for an author. And taking a quick glance to the left of our search results, we have this results by year graph. So we have results between 2025 going back to 2003. All right, let's go up to our search details and take a look at those. So this is what a name looks like when it maps to the author index. We have the word author in brackets. Notice in the translation section, the name was recognized as a full author name. And our name also mapped to an investigator index. So what is that? Well, in addition to the author index, PubMed also has an investigator index. And investigators are people who collaborated on the research, but not on the writing of a particular article. All names are automatically searched as authors, as well as investigators in PubMed, and you don't have to do anything special for that to happen. Okay, so what might be missing in our 234 search results over here because we used a full name? Think back to our slide that we had. That's right. Anything before 2002. Because PubMed only began accepting full names in 2002. And PubMed won't go back and add full names to citation records. So how would we run this search then to get the most comprehensive search for this author? Right, we've got that in there. Last name, space, first initial. So let's try searching that way. I'm going to go up to our query box and I'm going to enter Gomez, Reino, space, J. And we'll run this search now. Okay, we get 353 results this time, so quite a bit more. And glancing at our results by year graph over on the left-hand side, we now go back to 1979. So we would have missed all these earlier works. Okay, let's look at our search details. And looking this way, we see, yep, our name mapped to the author index and the investigator index. So now our question is, do all of these 353 citations in our results belong to the Juan Gomez Reino that we are interested in? Well, first it helps to think of what you know about the author, like what does the individual usually write about and what's their research area and what institutions are they affiliated with? So let's say that our Juan Gomez Reino is a rheumatologist located in Spain. Let's click on our results now and take a look. So we've got our name is highlighted. Here it is with 1J in the first citation. Down below, we see the name with 2Js, another mention of 2Js. So PubMed pulls up these variations because author names are automatically truncated to account for varying initials and designations like junior. To turn off truncation, you could do an author field search and put double quotes around the form of the author name that you want. So you could specify that you want the author with just 1J and not 2Js. For right now, we are just going to take a look at this first citation, the one that begins EULAR recommendations. And we see that this paper was authored by a large international task force. See a whole bunch of authors listed. Here's the one we're interested in, Juan Gomez Reino, number 22. If I scroll down to the affiliations, we can see where these authors are located. And down here for 22, we see this is for an author from a hospital in Spain. So yes, this is the author that we're looking for. I'm going to scroll back up now. I'm just going to collapse these affiliations. And I'm going to go to our name. Oops, there we go. There's a hyperlink there. When I click on that, that's going to search for that author. And we have this blue bar here above our results. And it's saying PubMed's computed author sort has kicked in. So results are displayed in that order and the publication date timeline is not available. So you see to the left, we no longer have that results by year graph. Computed author sort order is a ranking algorithm that compares citations with the same author name and then examines all the metadata of the citations. So for things like co-authors, journals, titles, affiliations, abstract, mesh terms, grants, publication dates. If an author name is computationally similar with an author name for additional PubMed citations, the results will display those citations first in ranked order, followed by the non-similar citations. And this behind-the-scenes process is referred to as the author name disambiguation process. Now, what if an author has worked at different institutions throughout their career? The computed author sort algorithm does try to account for that. So if it starts to find matches for a new institution, it will build that in. And if the person's just moved, it's probably going to be bumped to a lower part of the results. It is a challenge for the algorithm, and it's a good argument for encouraging authors to get an ORCID and to use that consistently. Are any of you familiar with ORCID? Getting some thumbs up. Yeah, ORCID stands for Open Research and Contributor ID. ORCID is a not-for-profit organization that provides these unique persistent identifiers for individuals to start using as they engage in research and scholarship so that they can distinguish themselves from each other. They can link all their research outputs regardless of if they've had a name change during their career or they've gone to different institutions. And PubMed started accepting ORCIDs in 2013, and it's one of the things that the computed author sort algorithm looks at. ORCIDs are supplied by the publisher if the author supplies it. And if PubMed receives an ORCID, it will be included for that particular citation, but PubMed won't go back and add it to earlier citations for that researcher. Similarly, if an ORCID is not supplied for the next citation submitted by a publisher or an author, PubMed won't go looking for that information to aggregate all of the author citations. So it's not fail-safe. It depends on what's been submitted, but it is another approach to take when you're trying to find the complete body of work of a researcher or author. So I'm going to take just a second here and show you how to search by ORCID. And we can use mine. That is on your handout. It's Search Example I. Just going to enter it straight into the search box here with the dashes. So 0000 dash 0001 dash 8468 dash 4398. So when you enter an ORCID into the search box without a tag, you have to enter the dashes. However, if you were on the Advanced Search Builder page and you chose the author identifier field, you would not use the dashes. So we have two different ways to search for this. So entering my ID. Oh, wait, what happened? Did I type in the wrong number? I did. Okay, we know that ORCID number does not exist. Let me run this. All right. So entering my ID retrieves one citation, but I actually have 9 articles indexed in PubMed. Some of them were published before 2013, and for some, the publishers did not request an ORCID. So this is the only one with my ORCID attached to it. I'll show you where that is in the record too. If we bring up the PubMed view and you scroll down to the author fields, you'll also see the author identifier field there. So this demonstrates that caveat I pointed out a minute ago that is not fail-safe, but now you know the format for searching and you have another arrow to add to your author searching quiver. Okay, so that's it for the author name table. The takeaway message is for the most comprehensive search, it's good to start with last name space first initial. And this will enable ATM to map the name to the author translation table and to the investigator index for all years of publication going back to 1946. Okay, before I move on, let's pause for any questions that have come up.
Okay, so we did get one in from Paul, and I don't know if he's there with faculty, but he said a faculty member is asking, how would you search by professional title? For example, how many records were authored by DPMs, doctors of podiatric medicine, as opposed to MDs?
Hmm.
And he did also say, I'm not sure PubMed gets that granular. So this might be an Amanda question.
Yes.
Sure.
That,
Yeah, I can hop in here. No, PubMed does not typically include the degree or professional title information. You might find that some publishers have submitted it in the affiliation field, but that is a little more granular than the PubMed data typically contains. And even if you did search in affiliations that way, I wouldn't expect it to be a very comprehensive search.
hmm.
So you may have to look in multiple places to collect that kind of information.
That's a good question. We have not had that one before.
That was the only one that came in.
All right. Well, anybody has any more questions, feel free to enter them as we move along here. So let's see. So sometimes when ATM does its job, it doesn't map or translate your terms the way that you intended. So we saw this when we searched for Sell the Journal. And this is also something that can happen when you search for a phrase. And we're going to perform a couple of phrase searches now and take a look at what's going on behind the scenes. So first, let's begin with the phrase pressure point. We'll enter that into the search box and don't use any quotes or tags. And this is search example G on your handout. So just pressure point, we'll run our search. Okay, let's go to our search details. Okay. So ATM tried to map the phrase pressure point to a relevant mesh term, but one wasn't found. So it broke our term apart and it translated pressure and point separately. So pressure mapped to the mesh term pressure in the subject translation table, and point mapped to didn't map to anything in our three tables, so it was searched for in all fields. And then we see a bunch of variations for each term was also searched. So in cases like this, where we had verified in the search details that ATM didn't map our phrase the way that we wanted it to, the National Library of Medicine suggests using double quotation marks around the term to force PubMed to do a phrase search. And doing this will bypass the ATM process, so there won't be a search for a mesh term. So let's try that now. Let's search for pressure point in our query box with quotes around it. And we'll run that search. We have 229 results that have pressure point somewhere in the record. We'll take a look at our search details. And there you see the search details are very different. PubMed kept our phrase together and we see pressure point was searched for in all fields. So if you are unsure whether it's best to double quote a phrase or allow ATM to do its thing, try the search both ways, with and without double quotes, and review the search details and results to determine which one is delivering the results that you want. Be aware that using quotes does not guarantee PubMed will find a phrase as you entered it. And we're going to take a look at this with another search. We're going to use the phrase dog wheelchair. This is a phrase a colleague looked up when her dog developed some mobility issues, and that's search example H on your handout. So I'm going to type that in now without quotes. I'm going to try searching this the recommended way first. Click that. We do have 29 results here. So let's look at our search details. Okay, we see that our terms were not searched as a phrase. They were broken apart and they mapped separately to mesh terms and all field and searched in all fields. So let's try now putting quotes around dog wheelchair, see if we get some different results. Okay, got that. We'll run our search. Okay, well, we get this message above our results that says quoted phrase not found in phrase index. Who's seen that message before? PubMed uses a phrase index to provide phrase searching, and phrases get added to the index through automated processes that are based on standard criteria such as phrase length and how frequently the phrase appears in the biomedical literature. Now let's look at our search details for this one. Already we have this big red exclamation point telling us something is up. We have our warning, dog wheelchair was not found in the phrase index. So the quotes were ignored and the term was processed using ATM. So let me show you now how you can verify whether a phrase is indexed or not. On this advanced search builder page, leave the field selection as it is, just all fields, and then type in dog wheelchair without quotes, but don't run the search. Just type it in there. And then go to the right of your screen to the add box, and underneath that, there's a hyperlink that says show index. So click on that. That is going to display the complete list of terms that are in PubMed's phrase index. And this is the answer to number 7 on your handout. Nothing is there for dog wheelchair, which we already knew. We do see the phrases that are close to it alphabetically, and in parentheses, we see the number of PubMed records that contain each of these phrases. Well, let's look for pressure point in the index then. Let's type that in without any quotes. Whoops, gotta spell it right. Pressure point. And don't run the search, but just hit show index. And there we go. Before we even run the search, we see that there are 230 records in PubMed that contain this phrase. So to recap, when you enclose a phrase in double quotes, PubMed will look for it in its phrase index. If there's a match, PubMed will search for that exact phrase in all fields. Remember that the use of double quotes in a search will turn off ATM. All right, so what can you do then if the phrase you're looking for is not in the phrase index, like dog wheelchair? There are a couple of different approaches. First, you might try modifying your search by considering synonyms or alternative terms for your topic. So, for instance, canine rehabilitation, dog mobility, physical therapy, mobility aid. These are all terms that are in the phrase index. And you could try searching with some combination of these phrases and other terms to pull up articles that might address dog wheelchairs. A second approach that's a little more straightforward is to try a proximity search for the quoted phrase with a distance of 0. And this will search for the quoted terms appearing next to each other in any order in the title and abstract, or affiliation fields. Proximity searching is outside the scope of this class, but we have included a link on your handout to the documentation for proximity searching. Remember that proximity searching is going to turn off ATM because the syntax includes quotes and tags. We have also included a link on your handout for a National Library of Medicine tutorial on phrase searching in PubMed that was just released in March. In addition to the information that we've covered here on how PubMed interprets and processes a phrase search, that tutorial explains 2 additional phrase searching techniques: how to search for variations on a phrase and how to determine if an exact phrase appears anywhere in PubMed or in a specific field in PubMed. And because that phrase tutorial mentions the PubMed user guide on search field tags, we have also provided a link for that on your handout. All right, any questions on phrase searching?
Nothing has come in yet. There was just that comment, when you asked, did anybody see that error message? Sarah said, yes, it always scares me a little, like her
Yeah.
search has an error. And when I first learned PubMed, I was like, what are you talking about? I have results,
Yeah.
so, but
I know that was always confusing to me too, when I didn't realize what it meant.
yeah, yeah. Live
All
and
right.
learn.
We are going to jump back to our slides here to wrap things up. We're going to summarize the 3 primary ways that you can turn off ATM when it's necessary. So 1 is you can use quotation marks. If you put quotes around a mesh term or an entry term, you are going to turn off ATM. 2, you can use search tags, such as the mesh tag or the title and abstract tag. And 3, you can use the advanced search builder and search by field, like the author field or the journal field. So this is the answer to the last item on your handout, number 8, quotation marks, search tags, and advanced search builder.